Calm, focus, happiness. Hey, Mindful Tribe. I'm here today with a serial entrepreneur, over 25 years experience in meditation and martial arts. And he's a psychonaut and a biohacker. We'll be talking about that. He operates High Performance Humans, and that's a company dedicated to offering personal development and leadership programs. And so we'll talk a lot about that as well. So I'm here today with Tim Bowie. Tim, are you in mindfulness mode today?
I am always in mindfulness mode. I think that's a great base to have. And thank you for the introduction, Bruce. And it's a
Yeah, you're
pleasure to be
welcome.
here.
Yeah, so let's start there. What does mindfulness mean to you, Tim?
Yeah, I think like mindfulness is very closely associated with like awareness, and then
Yeah.
probably awareness is very closely associated to a root of self awareness. And so I think like a base is just like being aware of like what kind of patterns are going on,
Hmm.
and whether they're conscious or whether they're unconscious. Conscious being like, what I have, projects I have work to work on, and unconscious being like, certain fears that I have of not getting things done, or relationship things that are kind of just brewing in the subconscious level, but just kind of just recognizing that they're there and how they're influencing my everyday life through the decisions I make or the ways that I communicate with people and how I show up in general. So I think mindfulness is at the bedrock of how I show up.
Yeah. Well, I really am impressed with how you show up on Instagram. You really have some cool things to share, and it's really interesting because it's down to earth, and you're sharing stuff that's essentially about mindfulness. And in the bio, I mentioned that you're a psychonaut. So tell us what that means to you.
Mm. Yeah, I think the journey of experiencing what is in our mind is what I would just call it, being a psychonaut. And I think a lot of times the allure of going to Japan or uh, Tulum, Mexico, or all these like destination resorts, it is like a really enriching experience to just step into another culture and just take on everything that's there and explore just beauty that exists within us. And I think it doesn't really get a lot of the it's not Instagrammable. And so it doesn't get a lot of the attention that it deserves. But I think there's like so much beauty that exists within us. And part of that you have to go through some of the things, some of the hardships that you've experienced. And I think, sitting down and meditating, you don't really have control or, over, what comes up. But when enough things are released and enough things come up, then there's less of the things that you're trying to avoid and more of the things that are just qualitatively there for you, about you, from your experiences. And so I think whether you're doing that through meditation or whether you're doing that through, some people use float tanks, or some people use breath work, some people go to the extreme and they use like plant medicine or DMT and things like that. So and I think all those experiences are equally relevant within their own domains. And so for me, I really think it's just important to spend a lot of time to just explore what's inside of us so that we know what we have to share with other people.
Well, Tim, based on your Instagram, I would say that creative movement is very important to you. Is that true?
Mhm. Yeah, that's very perceptive. Thank you. Yeah. I just, in general, I'm a very huge proponent, and I'm writing a book on flow state.
Okay.
And so I think, there's different aspects of flow, and the flow state where you have the physical aspect, you have the mental aspect, and I think you have the spiritual aspect. And there's everything in between, social, emotional. And when we're most creative is when we are in flow, when there's no sense of time, there's no sense of self, and we're just really connected to the thing that we are doing, and we're fully engaged with that thing. And I think everything comes through that space. And when I had like a lot of friends that are artists or musicians, and we all have a very similar experience, even athletes, being in the zone, is we all have very similar experiences to what that thing is. It's just a little bit different in terms of the domain that it exists in, but the way that we describe it is very similar.
Right. Tim, what are some of your successes as a result of being a biohacker?
Well, I would just say like the easiest one to talk about is mood and energy.
Yeah.
I think, growing up for a long time, I was depressed forever. I think like just the way that I grew up with my parents, just emotionally disconnected from my parents. Um, I just, I think one of the biggest things was having consistent energy and
Mhm.
consistent like good mood. And why I determine how I determine like what a good mood is just like how excited I am when I wake up and
Mhm.
how easy it is for me to go to sleep. And I think just sleep is such a big part of our lives that we don't look at. And so biohacking kind of should address like your circadian rhythm is really what it should address is like diet and sleep, especially, and then, just how you regulate temperature and things like that. But yeah, so I would say just to simplify it, it would probably be just energy. And like some of the things I do for that is just like when I wake up, I try to get daylight in my eyes as soon as possible, try to get a little bit of movement, like walking or jump roping or something like that. Get some vitamin D on my skin, I'll be in the back or something with just no shirt, just, some sunscreen, of course, but
Yeah.
just taking in the vitamin, creating vitamin D because your body really needs that. So I mean, most Americans, I think over like 70% are deficient in vitamin D. And that was a really big thing during the coronavirus pandemic period too, where just, people who didn't have vitamin D were more adversely affected. So yeah, it's a really big thing, just, health and energy.
Yeah. Are there any certain foods you avoid?
Seed oils, anything with seed oil. So like anything you go to a restaurant, most likely they're using canola oil or something
Yeah.
like that. So that creates a lot of inflammation. That also makes it really easy for you to get sunburns. It also, I think, makes you age a lot faster. So seed oil. I don't know if you could tell, but I'm going to be 35 in a couple months, and I think seed oils is not having seed oils is a good part of that. Not getting, sunburnt a lot is a good part of that, and that's just putting sunscreen on, of course, good sunscreen. Other foods, anything like too processed. So like, unfortunately, that means a lot of snacks. I don't eat too much
Yeah.
snacks. I don't
Yeah.
have a lot of sugar either. Like, I try not to. I mean, like, fruits and things like that. But I think sometimes I get cravings for like pie or like cream puff or something. And I'm just like, I shouldn't do that. So I just don't. Yeah, I just try not to. I just, I'll just take in some fat. So if you're having a craving, most likely, if you take in like an avocado or something, that
Yeah.
that usually squelches the craving. So I think that's really helpful.
Yeah. And, tell me about movement in your life. I mean, I've seen lots of it on your Instagram, but, what's
Mhm.
movement look like for you on a regular basis?
Yeah. So I think because like one of our like evolutionary highlights is the ability to walk and run. And
Mhm.
so I think incorporating walking and running is very important if we want to like think about like moving forward. And so, I do spend a lot of time sitting at this desk and around this desk. But I have an app called, I think it's called like Hangout or something or Timeout. And so
Okay.
every hour it'll just kind of blank out my screen and I'm like, oh, it's time for you to take a break. And I'm like, okay. And so like I pretty much plan all my working in like a 1 hour. I mean, you can set it for whatever, but I just set it for an hour, just an hour, and then we take a 5 minute break. And so I'll go outside, I'll do some jump rope. I have like an assault bike over there.
Mhm.
I don't think you can see it, but it's like one of those bikes that you can like that.
Mhm.
Or I'll just um in the morning, like I said, I start with like a 20-minute walk just on the treadmill and have like two infrared lights that beam on me. And so that there's some studies that show that it helps with collagen production, mitochondria, and mitochondria is like really, really, really important. Like as a biohacker, like that's one of the main things I optimize for is like mitochondrial health and gut health. But yeah, so aside from all that movement stuff, yeah, so 20 minutes in the morning, even though, I work at home, it's just like just like getting the blood flowing and just getting some maybe at the end, sometimes I'll do a jog or a sprint. And so
Mhm.
getting those endorphins pumping because endorphins are like 100 times more potent than, morphine. So, if you can get that in the beginning of your day, like you're already building up that sense of resilience from within. And, the drugs that we have within are quite powerful.
Yeah.
And then I try to work out like just in 30-minute sprints. So maybe if I can get two in a day, that's good, or one every other day, sometimes that's good. But just in 30 minutes, I have like a little setup outside. It's on my Instagram. You can see like there's like this, sauna, boxing mat, treadmill, all these weights and stuff. But just try to go out there and just nail in like 30 minutes, and 10 minutes of that might just be like warming up and doing some myofascial release, finding whatever trigger points I have from sitting around or whatever. and then just getting some movement in at least once, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And tell me about meditation in your life. Do you meditate?
Yeah, at least twice a day, sometimes more. Sometimes there, in general, I think there's two sort of domains of meditation where there's a contractive and an expansive. So you can also describe that as yin and yang or masculine and feminine. So like I think the first stage of meditation for me usually is a expansive state where I'm just sort of surrendering, allowing whatever, kind of non-focused meditation, just allowing whatever to arise to show up. And the main key is not to get attached, but just to observe and just observe what's showing up. Sometimes I'll take note, like, am I thinking? Am I feeling? Just like general note, just like that. Not like, what I should do tomorrow or later to, but just, thinking or feeling, just a little bit of labeling, just to kind of create that distance. And then once maybe I do that for a few minutes, or once things start settling down a little bit, then I'll tap into my sensory. So I'll tap into my breath and follow the breath out, and not just like let it fall out, but really like guide it out as I follow it out, and then start tapping into the domain of space around me. And I think
Mhm.
that's very helpful for relaxing into the space and really tapping into that and grounding into a deeper sense of space that really, like, what's beyond my skin is not just like outside, but like actually like I'm connected to everything eventually when I like relax into that. And then as soon as I feel adequately relaxed into that, maybe that takes 10 minutes or 20 minutes, and I'll go into a contractive state where I'll, start, dialing to my baroreflex response, or what you can call like uh, a certain type of breathing to it's not, not very conscious, but it's just a certain rhythm of breathing that allows me to like amp up my sympathetic system and
Right.
focus that on whatever is the object of meditation for the day, whether that's my body, my breath, or anything really. It could be
Yeah,
anything.
thanks for
So yeah,
explaining that. Yeah, what do you see as your purpose here on the planet, Tim?
yeah, I think multiple purposes for sure. One is to accelerate the amount of connection and compassion that we all have for each other. I think that's the bedrock for collaboration, which is the bedrock for innovation, which is our distinct and unique advantage as human beings, is to that we can collaborate. Like you and I, we don't know each other, and today we collaborate. And I think that's very special because there's no other species that we know of that really does that. And so I think when you have a unique competitive advantage, you really have to lean into that. And I think right now, the times that we're in it's hyper competitive, and intellectualization is weaponized. So, everybody's trying to strong man each other, or strong man each other. And, it's like just make everybody else appear not as good, or the other side, or whatever the case is. But I think right now that we have so much to lose by doing that, and so
Mhm.
much to gain by tapping into collaboration because of like recent advances in nuclear fusion, which, just last year, and then just last year also AI. I think these are like huge levers, like not just equalizers for those who quote unquote are like haven't been educated with third world country or whatnot, but also like even for me, like every day I use AI, and maybe we could say I have some level of education or whatever, but it's like advancing the ways that I can like process information and create. So I think the more higher levels of collaboration and the extension of through like vulnerability and safety that we have, the more we can bring out prolific work and benefit everybody around. And so like what I'm doing through my company is basically making flow ubiquitous, so that
Mhm.
it's not just like, oh, it's just for athletes, or it's just for musicians, or it's just for this or that. It's like we all experience flow. We just need to know when we're experiencing that, so we know what it feels like. We can have like an internal characterization, like an interoceptive experience that we can tap into like somatically, and then we can transfer that to other areas of life, and we can become more creative. We can become more free to um, just bring out what all of us basically. So that's pretty much one of my main purposes that I'm working on right now.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that, Tim. I want to
Yeah.
ask you about the subject of bullying because I've worked in the field of bullying prevention for a long time. And I'm wondering if you have a
Okay.
story you can share with us. It could be what going way back, or it could be more recent, a story where, it was about bullying, but mindfulness maybe could have made a difference somehow.
Yeah, sure. As a martial artist, I've been doing it for over almost 30 years now.
Hmm.
Same thing with meditation, a little bit less. And so I see a lot of bullying. We'll start with, I think my first experience with bullying was I was in second grade.
Hmm.
And I don't know why this kid was targeting me, but I guess I was just, I think I wasn't I didn't have a lot of, I think, self love, and I think I looked outside for validation at a very young age, just because of my connection with my parents wasn't we didn't have like the most wholesome connection, and so I think that made me a target.
Hmm.
I think it's easier to target people who aren't as strong outwardly, and I think that's kind of what perpetuates the cycle of bullying, because also on some level before they were that way, and maybe they were picked on for certain reasons, and so they just kind of create that cycle of just victim perpetrator cycle, um, and that experience it was pretty painful. I think I got like I wanted to be friends with him, and like I guess he didn't, and so like he like we were like on the playground, and he ended up, I don't know, like really like punching me hard in the stomach, and I was like, oh, and I just remember it was like this pain in my stomach. And I had
Mm.
the year before that I had gallbladder surgery, and like half my
Oh,
stomach is like there's like this huge scar on my stomach, so like
oh,
I was not in good shape already. So I had all that going in my head, and I didn't want to tell anybody about it, because my parents, may shame me or whatever. Probably I felt like so. I think there's a lot of alienation that happens with that. I had a recent experience. I was at a kickboxing gym a
hmm,
couple of years ago, and I walked into the gym, and I had planned to spar with a friend who I knew there, and I guess he was like a little bit higher up. And so when I came in, there's some other guy who wanted to spar me, and it was in like Dallas at the time, so I didn't know a lot of people. And like he was like, "Oh, well, like I'm not good enough to spar you or whatever." I'm like, I just came here to spar with my friend because that's who I know, and I don't want to just spar with random people, obviously for reasons like this. And so, anyways, we got into it, and then like we started sparring, and then yeah, and then he just like did some like we'll say less than honorable things during our time. So that happened, and I think it would have been easy for me to like be really upset with him and
yeah,
leave, and all that. But I ended up staying to spar with my friend. I didn't let that ruin my time, and I just realized that like say this all the time, like hurt people, and
yeah,
heal people, and I think he's probably hurting. And we don't. If we have joy, like I know that when I have joy, I want to share it with everybody, and I pray on them. Like I pray that all the people that are close to me, all the people that I know that like are going through illness, disease, or whatever. Like I think about them, and I pray on that. And so like I know that if I have joy, I share that, and I know that there are people out there who don't have that, and they have suffering and they have pain. They bring that out to other people because that's what makes them relevant. And so there's a understanding that I have. It's not just a rationalization, but an understanding, some empathy for their perspective. And so I think having that little space, that little buffer of mindfulness, really helps me in terms of not having an emotional reaction that like overtakes the experience of that day and could have potentially ruined the time that I had with my friends sparring and things like that. So I think that's pretty
right.
relevant and timely.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that, Tim. I appreciate that. As we move forward in the interview, I want to ask you 5 quick answer questions. So just 30-second answers are perfect. First one is this: who is one person who has been a powerful mindfulness influence in your life?
My Buddhist teacher, one of them. Yeah, my recent one. Mhm.
Awesome. And my second question is about emotions. And you've talked about this a bit already, but how has mindfulness helped you to deal with your emotions in a better way?
I used to have a negative connotation with certain emotions. And I think through
Mhm.
meditation, I realized that there's no negative or positive. Everything has trade-offs, and there's a pro and a con to everything. And I was previously overly fixated on one, which would cause sort of a resistance or a reaction towards that thing, which would make it bigger than it really needed to be. And so just realizing that everything comes on a duality or within degrees helps me realize that there's also a balance to everything.
Right. Let's talk about breathing and any advice or thoughts you have about breathing so that we can be more grounded and be more mindful.
I think, one of the things that I do every day is I have an energy check in with myself before, like maybe before getting on this podcast or before, starting work or whatever. And I just write down into my journal or whatever that I have. If I'm, taking a meeting or something, I'll have a notepad in front of me. I'll just be like, okay, just checking in 1 to 10. Where's my energy? One is like I'm falling asleep at the wheel. 10 is I'm ready to just like run through the wall next to me. And if it's below 6, I start doing breath work. And so that's just the commitment that I've made with myself that I want to show up how I want to show up. I don't want to show up like less than optimal, like,
Hmm.
just not firing on all cylinders. And so that's a commitment I've made to myself. And I think a smaller version of that is really just every once in a while, just taking a deep breath through the nose and then just like breathing it out through like your teeth and just feeling a little bit of resistance and just allowing that breath to just come out and following that. I think that just helps us dial back into our body because the more stress we have, like the less deeply we breathe. And sometimes it's just in our throat and sometimes it's in our shoulders. And then we should get like this. And so like just doing that just helps like relax because like it drives the breath down into the belly and that opens up, doesn't start, but like it opens up the parasympathetic response within the body. And I think that is important to actually being productive because, there's only so much you can do in a stress state. And I think a lot of the magic happens actually in the parasympathetic state. So I think just whether that's like whenever you get a text message ring on your phone or a
Hmm.
phone call, you just take a breath before. And I think just something as simple as that you just anchor it to something that happens
Right.
all the time. And I think that's where the magic happens.
Right. Right. I want to ask you about books. Is there a book that you recommend that can help with mindfulness or something that has really spoken to you on this topic?
Hmm. There's a lot. I think the Michael Singer book is good.
Hmm.
The one before the Surrender Experiment. I
Right.
forget what it's called. Um, and there's also the Beginner's Mind. I think that's a really important one. And I think that speaks to a lot of the purpose that I have. Is just that nobody's too important. Nobody knows too much. And, especially in regards to ourselves, like we all can learn so much more. And I just look at myself. I try to, and this is one of the things that my Buddhist teacher really tried to nail into me because I was very arrogant. Was that we're all just kindergartners, really, in
Yeah.
like in the universe, and so we shouldn't like treat other people like we're not kindergartners or that we're better than them in some way. And I think that's just really key to extracting as much value and wisdom from life as possible.
Yeah. I think that's so important. Any apps that you use that help with this aspect of your life?
Well, there's an app called the Apnea Trainer. I use that. Pre-meditation helps a lot. This is an app. It's my secret weapon. I used to train for like professional boxing and things like that. And what I would say is a lot of people train on like the VO2 max, which is like how efficiently your body uses oxygen. But
Hmm.
the other aspect of that is how well your body does in a high CO2 environment. And most people don't do very well. And that puts you easily in a fight or flight response. So I think um, the apnea trainer is a really good one, and another one that I use is called I think it's called breathwork.
Oh
I
yeah,
think that's
breath
just
work.
basic
That's a good one. And so Tim,
or
the apnea
breathing is
trainer,
also
how do
spelled.
you spell that? Apnea trainer.
It's A as in Apple, P as in Pennsylvania, N as in Nancy, E-A
Okay.
trainer, and that's an iOS app.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I thought that's what it was. Okay. We'll put all of those tips and suggestions in our show notes at mindfulnessmode.com, Mindful Tribe. So check that out. And so just before we wrap up, do you have any final words of advice for our listeners, Tim?
Yeah, I think one of the things that stresses us out is not being in alignment to whatever it is that we spend our time doing. And whether that's the purpose, whether that's like being with family, whether that's like being with friends, if there's anything stressful in there, like there's some way that we're seeing that there's some type of incongruency. And I think one of the things that helps clear that up is just understanding what our values are. I do have like a free quiz on my website, which you can find through my Instagram, which is it just kind of helps you identify what your values are and what's
Mhm.
important for you so that you can always show up engaged, getting the things that are meaningful for you instead of checking out and being less than, suboptimal, I guess.
So your name is Tim Bowie, Bui, but how do we find you on Instagram? Because I'm seeing that it's got DINH in there. Can you explain
That's
that,
my middle
please?
name.
Is that
Yeah.
your middle name?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I was wondering.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's easy to find
Mhm.
you on Instagram. It's Tim, Tim, and then DINH, and then BUI. So
Mhm.
check Tim out on Instagram, and you'll find some really inspiring pictures and thoughts and quotes and all kinds of things on there. So, yeah,
Thank
Tim,
you.
thanks so much for being on mindfulness mode today. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it has been fun. Thank you for having me. Thank you,
Okay,
Bruce.
all the best to you. Bye now. Oh,
Bye.